Jacques Talk is sponsored by Locke Meredith, Sean Fagan Injury Attorneys.
Hey, good morning, Jacques. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm talking to Garth Brooks.
Entering his second year as the LSU head football coach.
It was the only way I could get a foot in the door.
Joined by the icon, Kim Mulkey. Hey, Coach, great to see you. Well, as the LSU Tigers prepare to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks in Death Valley, we are joined by Alyssa Lang from the SEC Network, and Tiger fans love the SEC Network now, covering all the different sports. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for LSU to be coming off the bye and, of course, seeing them under the lights in Death Valley this weekend. Even though it's against my alma mater, I think it's going to be a really good game.
Well, I was complimenting you off the air that I had no idea that you were a South Carolina graduate until I read your bio there. So good job staying objective.
Thanks. I appreciate that. You know, it's funny. One of the top questions we get asked when you work for the SEC Network and you've got all 16 teams to go to is, well, as a South Carolina grad, how do you not pull against anybody who's playing South Carolina? How do you remain unbiased? And I know a lot of fans won't believe us when we say this, but it really is true. I, of course, want my team to win. But when you get to know Brian Kelly and his staff and the LSU players and the fan base, and that goes for everybody across the SEC, you kind of get to this point where you want everybody to win. So I don't hate anybody. I love our entire SEC family. And I pull for everybody all the time, which certainly makes it a little bit more complicated when I put my fan hat on, but it's still a ton of fun.
Well, I'm sure there's some South Carolina fans that just want you to go on the air and say, go Gamecocks, and everything's got to be positive. I mean, I know Kirk Herbstreit, he went through it with the Ohio State fans when, you know, he had to be objective about what he's seeing out there, you know, so.
Yeah. And I think there's room to do both. You know, you wouldn't want to watch someone on TV. This is my opinion. You wouldn't want to watch someone on TV who doesn't get what it is to be an SEC fan or didn't experience it or didn't grow up with it, because then you'd sit there and you go, well, you don't get it. You don't get what this passion is. So of course I started as an SEC fan. Of course I have a university to pull for. I think I can still simultaneously do that while being objective on the sidelines or in the studio and saying, hey, you know, I might even be harder on South Carolina sometimes than I am on some other teams because my expectations for my program are that much higher, of course. But it does make for fun times every single time you're in the studio or on the sidelines.
Well, there's Peter Burns, too. I joke with him. I call him Port Allen Peter. He grew up across the river here and has become a star as well, and, you know, has a great story. What's it like to work with Peter?
He's the best. Every time you're sharing a set or radio airwaves with him, you never know what's going to happen. He's trying to actively talk me into making a South Carolina LSU bet in the same way that he makes the LSU Florida bet with Chris Doering. I think, not that I'm afraid, you know, to back up my school, but I think I'm going to let that be their thing. Their punishments for each other are getting a little bit crazier as the years go on. And I don't think I want to have to dress up like a pumpkin or a clown and have Brian Kelly come on a show and see me like that. So I think I'm going to respectfully decline. But PB's the best. He's so much fun to work with every single day.
Yeah, awesome. Let that be their thing.
Yeah.
You'll carve out your own niche with something else maybe. So. Well, just tell me about the SEC Network real quick, because as somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, you listened to sports on the radio. You might have one game on TV, a couple of games. Now everything's in real time. We can stream all the different sports, not just football. I can watch soccer, volleyball. How's LSU doing? And then it's tweeted immediately as soon as LSU scores a goal or whatever the case may be. Here's the highlight. So SEC Network and the way you guys have really expanded how we can consume the product.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it's a point of pride for us, certainly, to be able to be more than just football, basketball, softball, baseball. I'll be in studio every Wednesday night this fall, and yeah, Gene Chizik and I do a show that centers around football, but we also do a pre-volleyball match show on the SEC Network. Typically, there's at least one, sometimes a double header of SEC volleyball action, and as anybody who's followed that sport knows, the SEC's only gotten bigger and better in that arena as well. So to be able to show off the insanely talented student athletes that the Southeast has on a nightly basis via the SEC network in every single sport: gymnastics, volleyball, soccer, of course, when you get into softball season and some of those spring sports as well. It really is cool for me, who, similarly to what you just said, growing up as certainly a female athlete who had maybe 20 people going to some of my games just in high school, I couldn't even picture what it would be like to be a college athlete with people watching in the stands or even on television. So that's to speak to, just where women's sports has grown in general, but then certainly from a TV aspect. And it's definitely a point of pride for me to focus on the women's side of that, especially. But top to bottom, I know I'm biased, but I don't think anyone's doing it like the SEC network right now.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the old chicken and the egg thing, right? It's like nobody goes to this sport because nobody covers it, and nobody covers this sport because nobody goes. So, I mean, like NASCAR, nobody, I mean, it had its niche, but it blew up when it started to get coverage and whatnot. Women's basketball in particular, South Carolina, LSU,
Yeah.
these two brands have really risen up here with star players, electric coaches, and Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey. I mean, that has broken into a new level of viewership and anticipation.
Yeah. And in that sentence, you're right, because when you think of the SEC right now and the top dogs, you think about South Carolina and LSU. And how about Tennessee kind of coming back from the glory years that they had under Pat Summitt now? It's a great league to be in if you love basketball. And like you said, we've had superstars to be able to showcase over the past few years. When Kim Mulkey got there with Angel Reese, that was an explosive year, obviously, and it ended with a championship for that squad. Now you look at what both of them are doing. Kim Mulkey, of course, still in Baton Rouge, and Angel at the next level. I've said this often, it's always been the case that women's basketball specifically has always had these superstars. They've always had these great personalities. Just in the last 5 to 10 years, we're finally giving it the showtime and the airtime that it deserves. So, for example, you mentioned I went to South Carolina. I started in the local news industry there in Columbia, and one of my first beats was South Carolina women's basketball. And it was when Dawn Staley was really trying to grow this program and get it to where it is now. We went to Storrs, Connecticut. I think it was 2011. Might not be 2011. Don't quote me on that. It was one of those early Dawn Staley years. And it was this big top 5 matchup, and South Carolina is going to go to Storrs and finally get a win over UConn for the first time. And South Carolina got their butts beat. And it was like, okay, they're not quite there yet. But that was when I started to really see where this sport could be going. And that was over 10 years ago now. Fast forward to where we are today. And it's such a great journey to watch that these student athletes and these coaches are finally getting the attention they deserve. And as you guys know, in Baton Rouge, it's worth it. People eat up the product and they love it, and they fill the PMAC to watch this team play because it's such a great show to come watch. So it's really cool to be a small part of women's basketball coverage on the SEC network, and hope to be part of what has helped that grow.
Awesome. Well, Shaquille O'Neal played 3 years at LSU. That would never happen today. The women's players, Flage, Michaela Williams, they're staying, and the fans are able to watch them for multiple years and get more attached to what they're seeing. And to your point, the ratings also, when LSU beat Iowa in the national championship, more people watched that than the LSU-Alabama football game when Jaden Daniels threw the 2-point conversion to Mason Taylor. I mean, Everybody watches LSU football, right? So, I know it's a national championship game compared to a regular season game, but that just goes to show you how far it's come.
The proof is in the pudding, certainly. And I was just thinking about this. We're getting ready for our SEC tip-off in Birmingham coming up next week, our media days for the start of the season, and thinking about prepping for that. I was going through some of my notes for LSU and starting to get the ball rolling there. Flage Johnson is just an athlete I know we talk a lot about, but I'm not sure we could ever talk enough about what this young lady is doing. I mean, from both of these careers that she has, and she's balancing them perfectly from being a basketball player to a rapper, and then also clearly taking care of the academic side of things as well, being in I don't know how it's possible to be so successful in so many different arenas. This woman is beyond talented, and there are not a lot of people who could do what she's doing. So we are very blessed to have her in the SEC.
Oh yeah, just lights up a room. As Kim Mulkey would say, that girl's got more joy in her heart.
I can't wait to ask them when we're in Birmingham about the sprints that Kim Mulkey made Flau'jae run for doing the impression of her in her office. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I think I've missed that. I need to
So,
look that up, but I've heard it. But
yeah.
I've heard Flau'jae say, well, we didn't get all that NIL money when I put, stuff like that.
So she put on a blonde wig and somehow got into Kim Mulkey's office and was walking around and doing her impression of like even Kim walking. And then a couple days later, Kim said, yeah, you better invite all your friends from TikTok to our gym to come watch you run sprints for breaking into my office. The relationship that those two have is one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah, it's great. She's up at 5 a.m, whether it's shooting baskets or doing her schoolwork. And so let's talk about LSU football real quick. So you mentioned Gene Chizik. He won a national title. I saw Coach O the other day. Patrick Queen had a stadium dedicated to him across the river.
Yeah.
Times did you hear "Go Tigers" from Ed Ogeron doing an interview? Or
Yeah, certainly plenty. I think that was, custom for him to end every single interview with that, right? And I still see sometimes my favorite thing about SEC fans is they'll see someone like a Coach O pop up somewhere, whether it's at a restaurant or I think I saw one at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and like everyone just wants to hear a Coach O go Tigers. Like everyone's life is complete when you hear that out loud and in person. So that was a fun time to be covering LSU.
Yeah, he was at the Ryder Cup the other day.
Yeah.
When I think Coach O, I don't think golf, but
No.
I've never
Me
seen
either.
him swing a club. I don't think I'm going to see that. But he was there. And I guess you were just getting started at the SEC Network when the 2019 team from LSU came along.
Yeah.
And in this new NIL era, I just wonder if something like that could we pay Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, all these guys across the board. How does that team stack up? I want an objective opinion.
Oh, man. So that's one of the games I feel like that ends up circulating every time we see just an elite team like Ohio State last year. Could Ohio State last year beat 2019 LSU? And I will say that every time I've gotten into a rabbit hole conversation with friends or gone through that discussion on social media, I'm not sure that I've seen a team that I think can beat 2019 LSU. I'm sure there's some in the history books that someone could make an argument for, but in my lifetime covering college football and being a college football fan, that team was unbelievably special. And I cannot wait for whenever it comes, the documentaries that will be produced about that team. And the more we learn, hopefully, about the fabric of that team and what made it special. I mean, you made such a great point, like the beginning of NIL and transfer portal, like that was one of the teams that we saw for the first time, the transfer portal really come to fruition, obviously with Joe Burrow at the head of the snake. So it was one of those teams that I will look fondly back on when I think about some of the teams that I got to cover over the years, and certainly in my first couple years at the SEC Network. But I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a team that stacks up to those guys, because that was unbelievable football to watch.
Yeah. And there might be an Alabama fan out there, Alyssa Lang, who may say 2020, but I look back on the year 2020, Alyssa, there's nothing greatest about the year 2020. It was
I think I kind of have washed those years from my mind, if we're being honest. Like, did 2020 actually happen? Obviously, I'm being sarcastic there, and that was a great Alabama team. But there's just something about that 2019 LSU team that, whether it was the swagger off the field that led to what we saw on the field, that just feels so intangible at the same time as having tangible success and championships that came with it. So I'll ride with that team for sure.
Well, 2020 empty stands, Thursday, Friday before a game. Are we playing or not? Do we have enough players? We're going to move this game to this weekend. I mean, it was just
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was wild. I can't imagine what it was like to, I mean, I covered it. I went to games and I was told, you need to stay in here at the 25 the whole game. You can't walk here or there. Wear your mask. Wow, it was a crazy time.
Yeah, it definitely was. I was kind of right at the beginning of that. We were in Nashville at the men's basketball tournament, and I was on the air on our Wednesday night games. And that was when the situation with Rudy Gobert and the NBA happened live while we were in that game. And I ended up doing a halftime interview with Commissioner Sankey, who at that point said, "Hey, we're going to continue to play, but to protect the fans, we're going to play in an empty arena tomorrow." And it was crazy. Obviously, there's nothing that can prepare you to cover a situation like that or a moment like that. And then the next day, Thursday morning, we were getting ready to walk over to shoot around and preparing to do these games in an empty arena. And that's when we got the call and said, go home, go home. They're going to call it. And that was obviously the beginning of what ended up being the rest of 2020. But I will never forget what that experience was like. And then to your point, fast forward a couple months later, I'm happy we played college football, obviously, because I know that was a question at one point. Speaking of documentaries, there will be plenty about that era as well.
Yeah. I remember by the end of that day, woke up, I was in Nashville too. Kentucky fans get in their car, we're going home. And then by the end of the day, they had canceled the College World Series.
Yeah.
Both men's and women's. And it was so shocking that that's months away. Are you kidding? But
yeah, it was crazy. I actually think, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I was at LSU's shoot around that morning when we must have made it to the arena and then they told us to go home, because I remember having a conversation with an LSU player who was kind of like, look, is this kind of weird? Like, the fans can't come, but we're going to be in here. Like, what's the and then ultimately that ended up being part of the logic of the decision that was made, but it was just bizarre. That's how I would describe that time. Just bizarre. If only I had bought stock in Zoom back then we'd all be rich.
Yeah. Will Wade was the head coach. I remember talking to him.
Yeah.
On the bus to go home. He had a team that was going to make the NCAA tournament, and obviously there was no tournament. He had a very interesting stay, Alyssa. He had a number of teams that made the tournament, and I think he only coached one of them. With all the stuff that was going on. But
very interesting.
Interesting time at Will Wade. All right, so LSU. What is your view of this current LSU football team? Under Brian Kelly, they've been good. They have not been great yet. There's been some fans are getting a little impatient after the loss to Ole Miss. What are you seeing from your view?
Yeah, I will say, I'm not out on LSU. I'll preface what I'm about to say by saying that I'm not down on them. I'm not out on them, but I am cautiously disappointed in what we've seen so far. If that's even a phrase, I'm going to make it one. I had LSU as my number one team in the SEC early in the season. I just thought, you look at this roster, you look at the caliber of quarterback that comes back in Garrett Nussmeier. I thought, of all this youth that everybody's excited about, no one's more proven than Nuss at that position, certainly with what he did last season. And it just hasn't necessarily been as explosive since the Clemson game that we thought it was going to be. Now, was Clemson maybe a misrepresentation of what the rest of the season could look like? Perhaps, because since then we've learned that Clemson isn't necessarily the team that we thought they were going to be. That said, the things that concern me at this point with LSU, and I think probably Tiger fans feel the same way, are not necessarily things that I've seen against a high-level SEC opponent. They're things that we've seen throughout the course of the season, an inability to consistently run the football. And then with Garrett Nussmeier, the question of health obviously is something that we've been talking about day after day. I am not someone to try to get on TV and say, well, even though the coach and the player said this, I don't believe it. That's not really my MO. If that's what you're going to tell me, that's what I'm going to go with. So that's my stance on that. But for me, when I watch Garrett Nussmeier play, I've been a little bit concerned, I guess is the word, about some of the decision-making that we've seen from him so far this season. I think the Ole Miss game, there were some glaring moments of that where I said, man, he's got a wide open receiver that had a walk-in touchdown. You throw the ball behind him, or you're trying to force it into double, triple coverage at times. That an inexplicable interception against Florida a couple of weeks ago. That's just the version of Garrett Nussmeier that I didn't even see coming, I guess. And that's not to say that guys can't make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You can't have a perfect football game. It's not how it goes. But some of the things that you kind of expect from younger guys or less experienced QB1s are some of the things that, to me, have been the head scratchers for Garrett Nussmeier. All that to say, everything I just said is fixable. Everything that we've been concerned about so far for LSU is going to be able to be addressed in their next month and a half of play. Obviously, now in the heat of the SEC schedule, it's going to be difficult. But that's why I say I'm not out on LSU, but I do think that we need to see some changes in some of those more important areas of just playing consistent football across all three phases, if that makes sense. So I'm high on LSU, or I started high on LSU. I'm not as high on them anymore, but I'm not saying that I couldn't get back to that place at some point this season.
Yeah. Well, listen, the thing with Nussmeier, the injury has just been so Brian Kelly, after the Florida win, volunteers that information on his own. Nobody asked him even if Nussmeier's hurt. He says he's been dealing with a torso injury. They eventually play Ole Miss. Kelly, after the game, says if Garrett's healthy, there's no problem. I specifically asked Garrett, "Are you healthy?" I'm not answering any questions about my health.
Right. That's the answer that I was referring to. Yeah.
So then they shut him down for the bye week, so he doesn't do any throwing. So now Kelly says he's healthy. I've heard, oh, he's fine. He's just making bad decisions, or he's got some mental things. But there are, like you said, there's been some cases where, I mean, no one's ever questioned Garrett Nussmeier's arm strength. He can throw the ball a mile.
Right.
There's been some passes that have been lollipops that have not, they've been underthrown. They haven't had the zip. So I guess that's the question. And it's just real disappointing, obviously, because the defense is so much better than they've been. And now the offense can't pull their weight. So, that's...
And that could, too, just be today's day and age of college football, right? Like, we've heard coaches say this, and I completely believe it. Like, the days of an undefeated national champion are over. The days of an undefeated SEC champion are over. There's no way we see that. And if we do, it will be a team that we likely talk about like we talk about 2019 LSU moving forward. So it's a challenge to get all three phases of a team in this day and age on the same page. But to your point, it's so understandable that LSU fans are sitting here going, really? We've had this historic offense for the last however many years, and now we finally have the defense to help us close out games, and we can't move the football down the field? Like, it's the heartbreak of being a college football fan.
Yeah. Well, Scott Rabelais, local writer, he described it well. It's like whack-a-mole, it's like as soon as
it's a great description. Yeah, for sure.
And to your point, and maybe there's no 12-0 Alabama Nick Saban powerhouse. We're frightened to play them, but then there's no bottom feeder Vanderbilt. We're going to take over their stadium. Nobody goes teams anymore. Arkansas is really struggling, looks like, but your league is very good top to bottom.
Yeah, 100%. And the gap has definitely closed. I mean, we just saw it this past weekend. For Vanderbilt to go to Tuscaloosa and have College Game Day be there, and Alabama fans, a lot of rational ones, coming away saying, yeah, we won the game, but I have a lot more respect for Vanderbilt now than I ever have, because while Diego Pavia and that Vanderbilt offense didn't necessarily look efficient, that Vandy defense, for the most part, until the fourth quarter, looked pretty stout. So that was a game that, obviously, to your point, you used to be able to just cross off your schedule and say automatic win. Just like we've always said, anywhere, any place, anyone, anytime in the SEC can beat you. That has never been more true than it is now. Look at Mississippi State, right? Like, they just went to College Station and they lost badly to Texas A&M, but they took Tennessee to overtime 2 weeks ago. I mean, that's a Tennessee team that was a missed field goal away from beating Georgia in the first couple of weeks of the season. So if that, crossover doesn't already start to paint the picture of where we are right now, I don't know what will. It makes it exciting, though, because there are 7 or 8 teams at this point that you could make a case for think they could go to Atlanta or be a college football playoff team. And that's fun, but it's stressful for coaches, especially when you look at what's coming for the next 4 years with the new schedule and opponents, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the second you start comparing scores and coming up with your own conclusions, Florida, they stink. They can't score.
Yes.
Texas goes in there and they get drilled, so it's just that's the league, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and we'll see what Texas Oklahoma looks like this weekend. That'll be while Florida was a great test for Texas and we learned that Texas maybe isn't as legit as we thought they were preseason against Oklahoma and that defense, it's going to be another test for them for sure.
Yeah. Give me a kind of a view of South Carolina. Lenora Sellers, I watched their season opener against Virginia Tech. Big arm, can throw the ball down the field, can run, obviously. Last game against Kentucky, I think their running game was as good as it's been all year. So defensively, they've scored touchdowns. Special teams have scored touchdowns. Beamer ball, right?
Yeah.
So, tell me about South Carolina coming into this game. They're about a 9.5, 10-point underdog.
Yeah. Well, Shane Beamer told me after that game that was one of the better wins that he has seen. One of the most complete in all three phases. That being said, Kentucky's not a very good football team, right? Like you should have done that to Kentucky. Certainly if you're South Carolina with the expectations and the talent that you have. I would tell LSU fans that in a way, offensively, it's like looking in a mirror, LSU and South Carolina. You've got this great quarterback with great arm strength. He's got such talent, but he's standing behind an offensive line that you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. You don't necessarily know if they're going to hold up in protection. You don't necessarily know, is this going to be a clean game or is this going to be a 5-sack game? Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening. So I would say that is where I would start. Lenora Sellers has all of the tools that you could possibly want in a great quarterback, and he is a great quarterback. He, of course, unfairly is going to be taking a lot of the credit and a lot of the criticism when things go well and things don't go well. The Missouri game was one that I went back and really watched with a fine-tooth comb, and that was a game where South Carolina came up with -7 rushing yards. They had 14 penalties. It was a 9-point loss on the road at Mizzou. So all that factored in, you would have thought that would have been a blowout, right? Like you put those two stats up there and you're thinking double-digit game. Lenore Sellers was on the ground entirely too much in that football game. I mean, less than a second until there was a pass rusher in his face. That's my biggest concern for South Carolina offensively, of course, against this LSU defense. Now, yes, you mentioned the run game has gotten going. Rasul Faison has been a guy that they've been able to lean on as these weeks have gone by. But where my attention really goes, and certainly will go against LSU in the secondary, is South Carolina's wide receiver room. They should have a guy that strikes fear into you. It should be Nick Harbor. He's got this insane track speed, physical body type is everything that you'd want. But he hasn't necessarily been that breakout player for South Carolina that they've needed him to be. There's nobody that necessarily you look at in that wide receiver room and you go, okay, that guy's going to gash us. No question, gonna come in. It's just limiting him. It's not stopping him. They don't have that guy. Now, on the other side, defensively, they lost a lot, similarly to plenty of other teams across the SEC who sent a lot of talent to the NFL, like LSU's offensive line did. But can this year's offensive line for LSU hold up against Dylan Stewart and South Carolina's defensive front? It's not what it was last year, but they still have some effective pass rushers in that way. It's a lot of new faces. This, to me, is probably the best test for both teams as far as a show me your identity. And for someone who will undoubtedly need to step up and become a household name for the rest of the season, this is the opportunity to do so, I think, for both sides of the football. So all that said, yeah, a lot of similarities between South Carolina and LSU offensively, in my opinion, at least from a production standpoint.
Yeah, great points. And I know South Carolina feels like they should have won that game a year ago. They were up 17-0.
Yeah.
Sellers gets hurt, and late in the game, they pick off Garrett Nussmeier, and they're bringing it back for a pick six and an 11-point lead with about 4 minutes left. And some guy decides he's going to take out Nussmeier and it's a flag, and it comes back, and the game went from being pretty much over to LSU winning it.
Too soon. It's too soon.
Too soon, even a year later, to bring that up.
Oh, and that's a heartbreaker because, as I take my broadcaster hat off and put my fan hat on, it's hard not to look back at that game and think if that goes differently, or if that pick six is counted, or if Lenoris plays in the second half, that's not a playoff team. If you win that game, you're in the playoff. And that's the toughest part, I think, of looking back on that game, is knowing that you lost to Ole Miss. You got, beat up by Ole Miss on your home turf. That was what it was. You lose in the final minutes against Alabama, but if you had gotten that win over LSU, you would have been in the playoff. And that's the too soon part for Gamecock fans, I think.
Yeah, that's getting Shane Beamer up at 3 a.m. instead of 5 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
When he goes on his walks. I'm sure you watched. Did you watch that SEC, the Netflix thing on the SEC?
I did.
Yeah, you were in it, of course.
Yeah.
Stupid question.
I actually, this is shocking. Maybe I haven't finished it yet. I still have about 2-3 episodes to go because I was kind of going fast and furious, and then the season started, and it's just so much football that I don't have time to watch more football. But at some point, I'll finish it. It was cool though.
Yeah. Well, I hope I'm not being rude, but Beamer's wife said it, and she's, it's so stressful. It's so this or that. And then I Google Frank Beamer's salary, and it's $8.1 million. So I guess, people out there are like, well, it might be stressful, but it's making a lot of money.
Yeah, as they say, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? But I have seen it up close and personal with coaches' families, from head coaches to assistant coaches, who are definitely not getting paid anywhere near that much. And it is stressful. Like, it really is. And in today's day and age, when you can be reached in social media and told how much that everyone hates you, I don't care how much money you make. Like, I tell my husband all the time, there's a certain level that I don't think I want to be at, because I don't want to open myself up to, well, you get paid to be criticized, and you get paid to be crapped on. And I don't think I could handle that, honestly. And so that it definitely is a wrinkle for sure. It's not easy.
Yeah, I'm kind of kidding with that.
Yeah, no, I know.
Humanity, we should treat each other well. And
We should. Yeah.
I talked to Will Muschamp the other day, and he talked about that. He said, they didn't sign up for this. I did, so
Right.
it's kind of like politics. Keep the wives and families out of it,
I even saw there was a lot of chatter about, did you see the video of Diego Pavia coming off the field in Tuscaloosa, and he was going back and forth? A fan was chirping at him. They're going back and forth. And yeah, Diego talked a lot of crap before the game, obviously, and they lost. And I saw some people saying that, well, if you're going to talk that kind of crap, you deserve it. I don't know if talking crap about thinking you're going to be confident about winning a football game and then being cussed at walking off the field is necessarily the same thing. And then I saw some people saying, well, they're kids. Why are you talking to kids? And then people are going, they're not kids. They're paid. Who cares how old they are? Why do we talk to people like that? Why would you talk to anybody like that? It doesn't, young, old, who cares? It's just, yeah, we should all be nicer to each other. I think that's a good way to put it.
A 12-pack, Alyssa. That's why they,
Yeah, exactly. Or more.
Well, let me just finish with this. Being a woman in sports these days, do you feel like there's always going to be the one guy, you're a girl, don't talk about sports on Twitter or wherever, Facebook, but I feel like we've got less and less of those people. What does it mean to be a woman in sports? Do you feel like you're being treated like everyone else, that everyone's on an equal footing? Don't talk about it. Yes, it is important. I'm a woman in sports. Where does it fall?
Yeah, I have always felt, for the most part, I mean, the examples of the opposite are few and far between, extremely supported by my colleagues. I think the people I work with, whether it's on the ESPN SEC network side, the people I work alongside in local media and that you're next to when you're out at these games, even to the coaches and the players, that's where I feel support like I never thought I would feel it when I got into this business. Because they always tell you, you hear stories about what it's like to be a woman in this business, and you kind of think about what it's going to look like for you. I will say, when you get outside of that bubble, that's when it gets bad. And it's unfortunately still more than that one or two guys on social media saying those things. I power rank the SEC every single week as asked by our digital folks. I do it with Dari Noka, Chris Doring, and Benjamin Watson. And of course, we all get on there to just go back and forth about football, right? It's football. Benjamin Watson actually had to call me, or he didn't have to, but he did after about 2 or 3 weeks of him reading some of the comments. And it was a great show of his character, first of all, to call and check on me because the comments were so nasty about something that is literally, it's football. It's football. And it's been 3 weeks and nobody knows anything about these teams. And all that to say, for me, navigating the space has its challenges. At the end of the day, I'm able to look at someone like a Benjamin Watson and a Chris Doring and the people who support me and remind me that I'm here for a reason. And I'm able to look at my body of work and remind myself and then hopefully remind others that I am here for a reason and that my intentions are good. And it is to share stories of these student athletes and to just talk about something that makes me happy, which is college football. There's always going to be nasty people out there. I have distanced myself from social media over the years. It just kind of is what it is in 2025, being in this business and certainly being a woman. I think it's gotten better. The opportunities are there and the support is certainly there. But that's not to say that you don't have to kind of cater your life to making sure you're not looking at the wrong stuff, but you're leaning into the right people, which I have learned to do over the years, thankfully.
Well, social media or just best thing and oftentimes worst thing that's ever happened to humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My cheap Zoom is running out, Alyssa. So,
okay.
You were wonderful to talk to. Really appreciate your time. We enjoy your coverage of everything. Is Tiger Stadium the loudest stadium in the SEC? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I did the Florida game there a couple years ago. I also went to Fred's the night before, and so I was severely hungover, which made it even louder for me on the sidelines. So that's a story I'll share another day.
All right. Well, I know the guys at Fred's, Jason Nay and those guys. I'll send this video to them. I'm sure they'll have it on a promo or something.
It was a great time.
Fred's indeed. They've got Tigerland by the paw. So.
They do.
All right. Well, have yourself a great day. Thanks so much, Alyssa.
You too. Thank you.